All right, my friends, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here. This is week 2 of the series that I'm doing on the Dutch test, more so in perimenopause, but we're talking about overall the Dutch test entirely and how it links to how we feel in midlife and also our hormonal balance. Today, we're going to talk about cortisol. We're going to talk about weight gain, everything that the Dutch test can give us insights on, as well as the complete hormone package, which I am offering right now. And I'm going to tell you more about that later in the episode. But today we're going to talk mostly about cortisol. Cortisol is one of those topics that gets brought up over and over and over again. I see it all the time on social media. So we're going to talk about things that I see on social media that aren't necessarily correct, that may lead you to believe different, maybe not untrue things on social media. And so today we're going to clear up that picture entirely and understand what cortisol really is, what it is, what the Dutch test is telling us about your cortisol and what that actually means inside of your body. But if you haven't listened to last week's episode, we talked about perimenopause, weight gain, and detoxing your hormone. That was last week's episode. So if you haven't listened to that, make sure to go back and listen to that either now or after this episode. One is not a priority versus listening to this one first. Either one is totally fine. So what I want you to know about cortisol is also what I want to debunk what you probably already think, or maybe you feel confused about with cortisol. Because here's the thing with social media and teaching people wellness things on social media, or social media influencers or whoever it is talking about cortisol, is that on social media and with wellness, if something feels extreme, if it feels very polarizing, if it feels very black and white, we have to understand that this is often a marketing technique. The reason is because the brain loves black and white. It loves clarity. It loves yes and no answers. And so if we deliver that, we as in like people posting on social media, that is a really good marketing technique to help you take action now, because it doesn't feel like you need to make any decisions on your own. It doesn't feel like you need any more information. It doesn't feel like you need to, like I said, make a decision on your own. Like I gave you a very clear answer why. Now you take the next action. And usually the next action is purchase this supplement. But just so you know, most of this, if it's very black and white on social media, it does not mean that it's true. And it definitely doesn't mean that it applies to you. And cortisol is one of the biggest victims in the wellness trend online, trying to tell you that your cortisol is high. Because if you've gone down the cortisol rabbit hole online, you are probably told or fed information that your cortisol is high and that's why you can't lose weight. And here's a supplement to fix it. And maybe you've even heard the term cortisol face, which drives me bananas, because the thing is that high cortisol is not causing your face to look puffy or different. Cortisol face, as it is described on social media, is not real. If you have actual cortisol face, you have an actual adrenal crisis. And if you are listening to this podcast, that is not you. You could have some inflammation, which is making you feel or look puffier, but that overall roundness that people love to show on social media as a before and after, honestly, it is them 10 or 20 years ago saying it's cortisol when actually it is having a fuller face of body fat, which is normal to have in your early 20s and even 30s. We can do that for all of us and our mothers and our grandmothers. We are all going to have rounder and fuller faces when we're younger. This is not cortisol. This is just your face being a face. So don't let these before and afters confuse you. It is not, it's a really good, easy way to blame this on something that is not. That's not what it is. So I need us to back up and actually understand what cortisol is and what it's doing inside of your body, because I promise you it's a lot more nuanced than high cortisol is bad and take a supplement and lose weight. So cortisol is your primary stress hormone, and it's produced by your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands is our highly intelligent system that sits on top of your kidneys, and it's like the alarm system inside of your body. And they're reading your environment every single day, how you're thinking, how you're feeling about your stress, how you're managing it, whether you're eating enough food, whether your blood sugar is stable, how hard you're working out, and are you recovering from it. Your cortisol is respondent to all of that. It is constant communication with your nervous system and with your hormones and also your metabolism. It's not just about whether you had a stressful meeting or a hard week. It's about the entire environment of your daily life. which is really good news because even if you have a high stress job, even if you have a high stress day-to-day life, doesn't mean that you're going to have high cortisol. Because if you're taking care of your body in between there, which means, are you nourishing yourself? Are you eating throughout the day? Are you hydrating? Are you moving your body and allowing yourself to recover? Are you getting sunshine? The basic things that our body physically needs, we can be resilient even with a high stress day to day. So your cortisol is responding to all of that. It's in constant communication with your nervous system, with your hormones, with your metabolism. And here's the thing I really want you to understand is we want cortisol. Cortisol is not your enemy. We want enough cortisol produced at the right times that our body can actually use. And when that's happening, you're going to feel energized in the morning. You can focus. Your body can build and maintain muscle. Your metabolism is working, which means that your body takes your food and uses it as energy and doesn't store it as body fat. And you just feel more like yourself. But when it's off, it can be off in a lot of different directions. And everything starts to feel wrong and confusing, and you don't know where to go with why you feel this way. And that's where the Dutch test becomes incredibly important and useful, because the Dutch test does not just tell you whether your cortisol is high or low, it shows you what times of day are you creating cortisol? Is your body actually using the cortisol you create? And at what times of day is the production happening? This is information that you cannot get from a blood draw. So I'm going to talk about the 3 patterns I see most often on the Dutch test, because you're going to see yourself probably in one of these. So pattern number 1 is high cortisol that your body is deactivating. So this is the one that really surprises people, because I will have a client come to me who is tired all the time, like bone tired. We can't get our workouts in. We can't do the daily things that would actually help us create energy. And when we get your Dutch test back, your cortisol production is actually very high. And you would think, if cortisol production is high, shouldn't I feel wired? Shouldn't I have a lot of energy? But here's what's happening. Is that your body is incredibly intelligent. And when it recognizes that you're producing too much cortisol and that your system cannot handle more of that cortisol production, it actually takes the cortisol and it converts it into something called cortisone. Cortisone is an inactive form, an unusable form of cortisol. So your body's producing a ton of cortisol and immediately taking it and deactivating it so you can't use it. And also sending you to it as a signal to feel tired and exhausted, because it's trying to get you to stop. It's trying to get you to stop producing so much cortisol by making you feel tired. But women in this day and age don't take tired as a signal. We just take it as something has gone wrong, but I'm going to keep going. Now, if this woman were to go back and have a standard blood draw for your cortisol levels would come back elevated. And your doctor might say, yes, your cortisol is high. But what that blood draw cannot show is that your body is taking all of this cortisol away from you and not allowing you to actually use it. And you're not getting energy from it. And your body is actually protecting you from yourself. This is why the Dutch test is so much more valuable than serum testing. It's not just a number, it's really a story of what your body is doing with that number. So then we have another cortisol picture, and this one is low cortisol. This would be late stage adrenal. If we go to the term adrenal fatigue or adrenal burnout, this is kind of that late stage of low cortisol. And this is the picture I know very personally because it showed up on my own Dutch test many of times. I discovered that my cortisol was very low, and what my body was doing with that little cortisol was it was trying hard to move it into cortisone as well. So I was barely producing anything, but then my body's like, oh, we can't let her have any of this cortisol. We're going to move it into cortisone. We need to send we need to send her another message to take a nap. And also hoarding cortisol. So I still had cortisol available to be used inside of my cortisol bucket. So also let me explain a little bit on what I'm talking about. On the Dutch test, we will see a picture on what are you actually creating? What is your adrenal gland pumping out for cortisol? And then we see another picture on what is available to be used. So this tells us how is your body actually using this cortisol? And then we also get the picture of cortisone. How much cortisone is in here too? So that tells us how much is your body taking away from you and not letting you use. My adrenal glands had essentially said, we've been running at full speed for too long. We are shutting down the production line, which also, FYI, your body will not stop producing cortisol entirely. It still is going to. It's just not going to give you enough. So, what this feels like from the inside is low motivation, difficulty getting out of bed, even after a full night of sleep, feeling very flat, kind of emotionally muted, sometimes depression, low mood, no drive. It can also feel, which is also confusing because it can also feel like anxiety. And anxiety, so much more so in your mind. Your mind is ruminating and spinning and going in circles, but your body is very low and very flat. And very sneakily on a blood draw, this woman's cortisol could actually show up as high because your adrenal glands are producing very little, but your body recognizes this scarcity and starts hoarding what is there. So the amount floating around in your bloodstream actually looks elevated, even though the production is low, because none of it is being used, because your body won't let you. Your body is trying really hard to protect you from yourself. And this is why you cannot guess at your cortisol picture. You cannot assume based on how you feel. And you absolutely cannot assume based on blood draw alone. So pattern 3 is one that I see quite often. And this is one that explains something that so many of you experience without ever knowing, why do I feel this way? You sleep fine, you get 4, 5, 6 hours in, and then around 2 or 3 in the morning, you are wide awake and you're not sure why. And you may lie there for an hour before you can fall back asleep. And then you wake up feeling like you barely slept at all. It's because then we go back into a sleep pattern and then it's hard to come out of it. So here's what's happening. Blood sugar instability from the day before does not stop being unstable just because you fell asleep. Your body is still managing your blood sugar instability at night. So when your blood sugar starts to drop in the middle of the night, which it will if you haven't been eating consistently or balanced meals throughout the day, your body perceives that it's an emergency. It produces cortisol to go out and find the glucose sources so that it can stabilize your blood sugar so your brain can get what it needs to function and to feel safe and to fall back asleep. But the cortisol spike at 2 a.m. is what actually wakes you up. And then you have cortisol floating around in your bloodstream, which keeps you awake until your body uses what it needs to use. And then you can fall back into a sleep pattern or you just stay awake, tossing and turning for the rest of the night. But on the Dutch test, we can actually see this because we can see where in the day and the night is your cortisol spiking and dropping. And we can see if you have high cortisol at 2 a.m. when it should be at its lowest. And that information changes everything on how I choose to support you because the solution is not a supplement to reduce your cortisol. Sure, I use supplements to help bridge you on where you are to where you want to be, but we have to address the reason why this is happening in the first place, which is often your blood sugar instability during the day, so you can actually rest at night. And while we're talking about cortisol, I want to sneak in a little bit of talking about the muscle connection that so many times this is brushed over, and we don't talk about how important the cortisol and the retaining and building muscle communication happens. Because a lot of times I see women either working out real hard, trying to build muscle, and we can't. We just either stay the same, we don't build, or we continue to break down, or we don't have enough energy to be able to get our workouts in, which is also going to create a disconnect in building and maintaining muscle, which is going to change your metabolism. And also the low cortisol picture, which is going to be your body doesn't ever have enough energy to create muscle in the first place, even if you're doing your workout. So cortisol and muscle have a very direct relationship, and it goes in both directions because when cortisol is chronically high, it becomes what we call catabolic. Catabolic is breaking things down. And muscle is one of the first things that cortisol is going to break down when it's too high, too often, for too long. And your body, and here's why, your body doesn't actually need extra muscle to stay alive. It just needs the bare minimum, right? And muscle is metabolically expensive. It requires energy to build and maintain. But body fat, that's your body's number one safety net. It's stored energy. So when your body is under threat because it's seeing that cortisol is high, it's saying, this isn't good, I'm under threat. And your nervous system is saying, things are not safe. It's going to break down your muscle. and store it as body fat, because that is what it understands as it needs for protection. I'm going to say this again. Body fat is your body's number one safety net. It is stored energy. Your body prefers this source of protection and energy on your body versus muscle. So as you are maybe trying to build muscle and your cortisol is constantly high, your body is taking that, it's breaking down what your body is building for muscle, converting it into body fat because your cortisol is high or dysregulated. Because your cortisol is high and dysregulated, your body doesn't feel safe. It's going to go and make the safest thing it can rely on, which is body fat. And also is not energetically expensive to keep body fat on your body, but it is energetically expensive to keep muscle on your body, even though that's what you want, right? It requires more energy to keep and maintain that muscle. And this is why women in high stress states, even when they're eating well and working out, start to lose muscle and gain body fat at the same time. When before 10, 20 years ago, this built muscle kept muscle on your body. And now it's like, what the heck is happening? Why am I adding body fat? And also, I don't feel like I'm getting stronger anymore, right? This isn't because you're not doing enough. It's because there's a biology issue here that we need to understand what's going on underneath the hood. On the other end, when cortisol is very low, your body's in a full conservation mode. It does not have enough perceived energy available to invest in building and maintaining muscle. So your workouts will feel incredibly hard. Weights that should feel manageable feel incredibly heavy. Progressive overload, which is continuing to build on higher weights, higher sets, higher reps so that you actually do strategically become stronger, feels impossible. You go to the gym, you do the work, but it ends up to be the same work over and over and over again, or you're constantly deloading, saying, I can't do what I did last week or even a month ago. And your body's just not responding the way that it should. This is your adrenal system telling you that your body does not have the resources available to build right now. And the way that I support women through this is addressing the root cause system, which is always going to come back to your nervous system and your nutrition. And we make sure that your body feels safe during your workouts. We fuel before and around your training so your body knows it has what it needs. We design workouts strategically so we're not burning the same muscle groups down repeatedly without recovery. And we focus on progressive overload because that's the signal that your body needs to know that building muscle is actually the priority. But that only happens when we're taking care of the foundation, your nervous system and your nutrition throughout the day. And when your cortisol picture starts to stabilize, your body's now able to invest in muscle again. And your workouts feel like they're working again. And your metabolism, which is directly tied to your muscle, starts to come back online. So I want to circle back to something I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, which was that you cannot out supplement your cortisol. That is so often what we want. Just tell me what I can do quickly and easily so that I can feel better and I can move along. And I know that you want that. And I understand that you want that because you're busy and there's a lot for you to be doing. And there's a lot of other things that you want to focus your energy on. And taking a supplement would be a whole lot easier. And yes, is some supplementation beneficial? Yes, it is. However, we cannot out supplement the cortisol picture. And we cannot guess on what our cortisol is. So even if I described what similar symptoms are of low cortisol, high cortisol, cortisol dysregulation in this episode, and you're like, yeah, I feel that, we still simply cannot guess because I have been surprised more often than not when it comes to the cortisol picture. When somebody tells me how they're feeling, I can guess, I can assume you have high cortisol, but then we get the cortisol test back and you're actually very low. Right? So we don't want to guess on cortisol because that will make you feel far worse than better. And you're going to run circles forever and ever and ever without actually getting to a place where your cortisol is regulated. Because the root cause reason is always going to be your nervous system. It's always going to be how safe your body feels day to day. It is how you are feeding yourself, how you are moving, how you're recovering, and how much chronic stress has been living in your body over time. A supplement is not a nervous system reset. And without knowing your actual cortisol picture, and what you're producing, what you're using, and when. You're just simply guessing. And guessing is why so many women spend years doing all the right things and never feeling better. I want to tell you a story about a client that I'm currently working with because I think her story is going to land for a lot of you. She came to me overwhelmed, high stress. She has ADHD and she was really struggling. Her thoughts were scattered. She felt chaotic all day. Her focus was really difficult to access, even with medication. And that anxious fight or flight feeling was just always running in the background constantly. And she felt like she was just holding on by a thread. So we ran her Dutch test and her cortisol was very elevated. And when I looked at her nutrition picture, the answer was immediately clear. She was not eating enough. She wasn't eating enough because she couldn't hear any hunger or fullness cues because of her ADHD medication. It blocks that hunger feeling and it increases the fullness feeling. Very similar to what a GLP-1 feels like for many women. It's just like not hearing hunger and fullness cues. And she wasn't intentionally restricting. She just really thought that she was listening to her body because her body told her not to eat. She's like, I'm not hungry, so I'm not eating. But after some education and showing her her cortisol picture and the fact that her cortisol was running very high because it was very undernourished, she started to see the entire picture and why this high cortisol was making her feel scattered, unfocused, overwhelmed, even with her medication. She wasn't eating, her blood sugar was crashing throughout the day, and her body was producing the emergency cortisol to compensate. So her nervous system was in a constant alarm mode, which was making her ADHD symptoms worse. It was a completely vicious cycle. So the first thing we did was so simple. We just added a smoothie in the morning. And you're like, well, that's lame. Maybe you do have a smoothie in the morning, or maybe you do eat breakfast at 10 a.m. or whatever it is. But it's that simple act of consistently fueling her body that now the anxiety running in the background has quieted. The scattered, unfocused, chaotic feelings dramatically decreased. Because her cortisol is no longer spiking to compensate for blood sugar emergencies that she was creating every single day, right? She wasn't broken. It was just that her body was really trying hard to get her attention. And what actually was an undernourished body that was very hungry and needed nourishment was being shown as increased ADHD, increased anxiety, no focus, constant overwhelm. Right? So we have to look at the symptoms that we have every single day. Just because you're not physically hungry does not mean that your body doesn't have unmet nutritional needs, right? And that's why her cortisol was so high. Her cortisol was literally fighting for her life, trying to find nourishment. So if you were listening to this and any of this is landing or you feel completely understood and seen in this episode, if you recognize yourself in one of the 3 cortisol patterns, if you've been working out constantly, not seeing muscle growth, if you're waking up at 3 a.m. wondering why, if you're exhausted even when nothing in your life feels like it should be that hard, it's not in your head, right? The cortisol picture is real. It's measurable and it's a testable thing. And when we know what your picture actually is, we can build a protocol that's designed specifically around your results. And that's what I'm doing inside the complete hormone package. And for the rest of May, I'm offering this at $8.99 with payment options available at only $2.99 a month for 3 months. You can also use HSA and Flex. It's going to include your full Dutch test so we can see your complete hormone picture, your adrenal and cortisol picture, how you're detoxing your estrogen, like we talked about in last week's episode, the nutritional organic acids. We're going to look at everything. And then I'm going to build you a personalized 12-week protocol based on your actual results. So your nutrition, your workouts, your nervous system work, your supplementation, plus you have 3 follow-up visits with me so we can stay connected and on track. Just remember, this isn't a cookie cutter plan. This is all built from your real life data inside of your Dutch test. And the special pricing closes on May 31st. If we were to unbundle this package, it would be priced at $1,700. So this is a real good deal for you. So if you want to get started, you can schedule a consultation inside of the show notes. You can also head to Instagram and DM me the word Dutched, and I will send you all the information on scheduling a consultation, or you can check out with the link right there in the DM as well, and or the show notes. And if you want to just shoot me a message, you can do that on Instagram as well. I'm at Melissa_Ike. You can also send me an email, melissa@melissaikewellness.com. I'm not hard to find. Just shoot me a message wherever you find me, and I will likely see it and get back to you if you have any questions. But I hope to see you on a consultation where I'm going to take a look at your entire health history, especially your hormonal history, and let you know, is this the right package for you? If it's not, I'll tell you, I'll be completely honest that I don't think this is right for you at this time. If I have something else to offer you that I think would be beneficial for you, I will gladly offer that to you as well. But we'll have a clear, honest conversation on what this Dutch test or the complete hormone package will do for you, how you'll feel afterwards, and if you're the right fit. All right, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm so excited for next week's episode. We're going to get into the Dutch test as well, but we're going to go more into the PCOS, formerly known PCOS, now known as PMOS, picture on the Dutch test. If you're not sure what that is, no worries. Just come listen to the episode next week and you'll start to learn and understand more. But if you are somebody currently living with a questionable diagnosis of PCOS and or you have a confirmed diagnosis from your doctor, you're going to find this episode next week to be incredibly helpful. All right, my friends, I will see you next week.